Is the U.S. economy heading into a recession?
Well, it may be. We're not thinking in terms of recession. We're thinking in terms of the virus.
There is no need to panic. Grocery stores and pharmacies and banks and gas stations will remain open.
Empty stores and streets, closed schools and shuttered businesses. It's a new age for America in the wake of the coronavirus. But for how long? We have a thin line, a thin margin for error on our ICU beds. How close to maxing out are we? And what happens if it does go into June, July, or even August?
Well, my hospital in New York City is already pretty full and able to keep up, but they're on the edge.
You've seen him on the Dr. Oz show. Tonight, Dr. Mehmet Oz joins me to discuss the potential impacts to hospitals and our healthcare system. Plus,
the Chinese, they precipitated and then they accelerated this problem.
Former National Security Advisor KT McFarland pinpoints the blame on the coronavirus pandemic. We also welcome back Dr. Dina Grayson and Dr. Colby Grossman to talk about testing and when the worst of it may hit the U.S. That and so much more right now in America This Week. Welcome to America This Week. I'm your host, Eric Bolling. Right now, America looks a lot different this week. Many of you and now your children are at home and will likely remain there in the coming days and weeks ahead. In times like these, I believe it's my job to deliver information, not inflammation, to give you facts, not feelings, and to always call out the hypocrisy when I see it. We're in the early stages of a very difficult time in America. As I've said for the last 2 weeks, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I want to be clear. This virus is the most dangerous event to threaten our way of life in more than 100 years. I'm certainly not downplaying the dangers of COVID-19 when I point out some observations. That said, we may have hit peak stupid. That's a term I came up with while watching cable news this week. Watch as a woman goes apoplectic on another woman in the aisle of a Florida Walmart.
What the are you supposed to be
That brawl was over a bottle of water. A bottle of water, folks. And this fight for toilet paper heard round the world. Look, I get it. People are scared. People are anxious. Those fears are making people act in irrational ways. Over the years, I've seen my share of black swan events so severe they simply cannot be predicted. That's a black swan. Confusion, anxiety, angst, and stress overwhelm logic and common sense. Black swans, that's what they are. A 1987 stock market crash, a black swan. 2001 terror attack on American soil, a black swan. 2007 financial market meltdown, another black swan. In black swan events, in this one, a novel virus is creeping, lurking, spreading, and killing. And if that wasn't enough, the stock market is crashing and the grocery store shelves in America are bare. The smartest people in the room appear concerned and at times perplexed. It's almost as if Black Swan 2020 is the prior black swans all wrapped up into one big bad bird. This is a lot for people to digest all at once, so anxiety overwhelms us. We act out against our neighbors, our community. We hoard stuff because we don't know what's coming next. Is there going to be water, food? Is martial law next? Is it all just so confusing? People are stabbing each other over bottled water, clobbering each other over toilet paper. This is all new territory. Now, hear me out. I'm not going to stand here on a stage and tell you what's next if the leading virologists don't know, and neither do I. What I do know is what is right and what is wrong with what the media is being fed to us. Remember, in news, if it bleeds, it leads. But when media hacks are more concerned with scaring you into a partisan political opinion than providing useful, life-saving information, that's just bad journalism, frankly, quite dangerous. It's amazing to me, this stuff I'm seeing and hearing on the airwaves. I'm blown away at colleagues on both sides of the aisle making crazy claims and disguising them as news when both sides have collectively lost their minds. I call this peak stupid. Have we hit peak stupid yet? Well, I wasn't entirely sure that is until I read Washington Post reporter Josh Rogan's tweet this week. Rogan tweeted, at the moment America and the world was the most fearful of what's to come, Rogan tweeted a cheap shot at President Trump for calling COVID-19 the Chinese flu. Now, let me explain something to you, Josh. COVID-19 originated in China. It was covered up for weeks in China. Doctors who knew too much were silenced in China. Infected people for weeks fled China. We're all in this show because of China. So yeah, it's the Chinese flu. It's the Wuhan flu. And no, it's not racist to call it that. You, Josh Rogan, have officially delivered the high water mark in peak stupid. But guess what, folks? To be completely fair and unbiased, the other side is at fault too. Fox's Trish Regan, among others, went so far as to downplay the conspiracy rabbit hole as to proclaim the coronavirus is a hoax and not nearly as deadly as being reported, a hoax perpetrated by Democrats to bring down Trump in his bid for re-election.
To tipping point, the chorus of hate being leveled at the president is nearing a crescendo as Democrats blame him and only him for a virus that originated halfway around the world. This is yet another attempt to impeach the president.
Regan was benched immediately for making such an asinine claim. What we at America This Week steered clear of the politics from the start. Last week, we gave you a special jammed filled with facts, loaded with the top doctors in the war on the coronavirus, and I promise you to stay on policy and away from the politics as best I can. There'll be a time for playing politics, to take sides and to play the blame game, but now is certainly not that time. So let's get through the worst times America has seen, felt, lived through in a lifetime. And we will, but by all means, let's learn from our mistakes and try not to repeat them the next time a pandemic ravages its way through our amber waves of grain and through our world-class cities and suburbs. Because it appears there are three guarantees in life going forward: death, taxes, and the next coronavirus. Let's be ready for the next one. I'd like to introduce a man I've known for quite a while, back from my earlier days at Fox, Dr. Mehmet Oz. By the way, he has the Dr. Oz Show. You got to check your local listings. It's nationally syndicated. Dr. Oz, you are in high demand. Thank you for spending some time with our audience. As you know, we're spread out across the United States, sir. So tell us, one of the things that I've seen you talk about and write about recently is the risk to our hospital system. Can you explain that a little bit?
The problem with our hospital system is it's designed to take beautiful care of critically ill people, but over time. So you just get a couple cases, you manage them well, you let them go home, new cases come in. Countries like Italy, another Western European country, well known to a lot of Americans, is a very similar system. But if all of a sudden everybody gets sick at the same time, you're not able to manage all those cases because you don't have the expandable ability. It's not an accordion. And so you necessarily have to start triaging deadly ill people. And that's what happened in Italy when nurses and doctors are saying, you get a ventilator, you die, because I don't have two ventilators. And we want to avoid that in America, which is why the push to slow down the growth of the coronavirus pandemic is so important. If we can dent it, slow it a bit, and then be able to manage these critically ill folks as they get ill, because they're going to get ill over time, then we'll be able to save them all. Otherwise, we'll start running short on supplies, manpower, and most importantly, resources to do what we do best.
Doc, you mentioned a term that I hadn't heard prior to hearing you, and you said we're in trouble when hospitals get sick. What do you mean?
Well, the weak link in the system are the hospitals. So if our nurses and our doctors get ill, if the hospital system is unable to manage all the people in it, if you overwhelm the rooms, you now have sick people with coronavirus in the hallways, the natural techniques that we have grown and prospered with fall apart. There's a very thin veneer between a civilized, organized, high-tech approach and chaos. And a sick hospital system, unfortunately, is not able to be that buffer anymore if it starts to implode.
So the New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo said 45 days they believe they'll peak in New York State. As far as corona, the president said it could go as long as July or August. If that were the case, I know, doctor, give us the numbers. We have a thin line, a thin margin for error on our ICU beds. How close to maxing out are we? And what happens if it does go into June, July, or even August?
Well, my hospital in New York City is already pretty full, and they're able to keep up, but they're on the edge. We have a series of emergency plans in place that they could allow us to accommodate more sick folks. But just to make a point about the expectations, although the number of cases will continue to increase, the the number that are sick enough to go to an ICU, and more importantly, the number who die, we don't believe will increase as rapidly. Again, that's because we're getting better and better at treating these folks. We now have the ability to take medications that are already successful for other viruses like Ebola or HIV and repurpose them to use it for coronavirus. We even have medications for malaria, which may end up being prophylactic. They may be able to benefit us. We can use them for healthcare workers before they get ill, maybe reduce the chance that they're getting ill. So our ability to treat the problem is getting better, independent of the number of beds we have. So we just want to buy time. So 45 days till the number of cases peak, but hopefully we're already before that, we'll have peak with number of people dying from the problem. And then allow it to continue, because it's going to. 50% of the U.S. public population, we believe, will get infected over the next year. And so if it's going to happen, just let it happen slowly. Most people have very trivial symptoms. I mean, they don't even know they're sick. That's one of the reasons it's so contagious, because you don't appreciate when you're feeling ill enough to quarantine yourself. But it spread that out over the summer. Now, President Trump, you mentioned, said July, August. It turns out that that may be true. My expectation, talking to some other members of his task force, is that it'll probably be more like 8 weeks. So that by June, I'm hoping that there's no more blood in the water. People will feel comfortable getting in again and taking some risks, appropriately risks, about running to their, going to their businesses or doing what they need to do to get America back in on the success train we have been on for the past few years.
Doc, there are two different outcomes that have come from. It left China, and then we saw what happened in Italy. We know what happened in Italy, potentially even Spain. That was a bad outcome. You look at South Korea, and it feels like, at least early call here, is that it's a much better outcome than what Italy did. What did Italy do wrong, or what did South Korea do right that Italy didn't do? And and by the way, are we able to follow the path of South Korea?
We could definitely follow the path of South Korea. Italy's about 2 weeks ahead of us. So we got a little bit of a head start. We already took a lot of bold actions over the last 5-6 days. And a lot of the maneuvers you've seen, closing schools, bars, restaurants, things you probably could have done a week or two ago. There wasn't a big will from our political leaders, but also from the public to do that. A lot of folks are saying, you're overreacting, please. But when the virus started to hit and had the impact that public health officials had predicted, you get the societal will in gear and you start making the brave decisions that are required. Italy stalled. In Italy, what ended up happening was you have political leaders saying, I don't want to upset the business community. I don't want to put Milan into a crisis. Northern Italy is really important for us. And so for a bunch of Italy-specific reasons, they stalled making some of the brave decisions that today they've made. I talked to Newt Gingrich yesterday. His wife is the ambassador to the Holy See in the Vatican. And he said, this is like ancient Rome. It is so organized and so methodical, and everyone's following the rules because they got scared enough to do the right thing. So I think, got scared early enough to process.
Doc, I flew into D.C. this week, and the plane was empty. I was the only person on the plane, maybe one others. D.C. was a ghost town. We are clearly practicing social distancing. Did we do it in time? Did we catch this in time? And are people adhering to it enough?
We definitely caught it in time. I wish we'd done it earlier. It would have reduced some of the pain. The question for me is, how aggressively are we going to embrace social distancing? And the way to do that is to make it a national policy. You can't get together in large groups. Do it. What's happening in New York and California can be emulated in other states. Ohio as well has been pretty proactive. Georgia. And so if all these states get together and say, this is the new rule, this is the new normal, we're going to suffocate this pandemic over the course of the next few weeks, then begin to pull back, that'll work.
All right. Dr. Mehmet Oz, thank you very much. The Dr. Oz Show, again, check your local listings. It's nationally syndicated. Dr. Oz, good friend of mine for a long time, sir. Thank you for spending some time, at least maybe putting some of our viewers' minds at ease just a little bit until we know more. Thank you, Doctor.
Take care. Stay well.
Dr. Anthony Fauci leads the president's coronavirus task force. He's one of the world's leading immunologists and is with the National Institutes of Health. In a one-on-one interview, I asked him about the possibilities that the coronavirus is man-made. He also discussed the evolution of COVID-19. Take a listen. Sir, let me start in China, if we may. We believe that to be the origin of COVID-19. Do we trust what the Chinese are telling us about the numbers and what went on there?
Yeah, I think right now we do. In the beginning, when the first cases were recognized towards the end of December of 2019, they were giving the impression that there wasn't really any human-to-human transmissibility. There was just animal to human. Well, there's no doubt that originally, when it started, it was one of those situations where it jumped from an animal reservoir to a human. But they were having human-to-human transmissibility for at least a few weeks before they finally let people know. And that was to their detriment, but then ultimately to the detriment of the rest of the world, because instead of identifying and warning their population to be able to essentially not go to crowded places because there's a respiratory illness going around, they acted like there was no danger. And there were things like, 40,000 person street parties in celebration of the coming new year and things like that really made it very, very difficult to do any containment. And by that time, the horse was out of the barn. But today, where we are right now, we really believe that the numbers and the information that's coming out of China is actually correct. And in that regard, we also, as part of the WHO team that went there, we in the United States had 2 representatives who did that, one from the NIH, my institute, and one from the CDC. Bottom line is that today we do feel the information is correct.
So, Dr. Fauci, I hear that and I understand that, and I hope you're right. My concern is, and this is something that's been talked about, is this, in fact, what you mentioned, an animal to human transmission? Did it jump from animal to human? The concern is, and it's a valid one, if people are worried about it, it's a valid one, is that Wuhan province in China is one of the areas that they produce biological weaponry for the Chinese army, military. Is it possible? Is it possible that this may be a leak from that laboratory by accident, right? By accident, but maybe the cause of this?
Well, when you're dealing biologically, anything is possible. Let me tell you why that's extraordinarily unlikely. First of all, we know that these viruses jump species. We had SARS in 2002, which went from a bat to a civet cat, which is an animal that's eaten and sacrificed at festival dinners in China. That was in 2002. In 2012, we had MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, which was essentially going again from a bat, this time to a camel, and then in Saudi Arabia it broke out. If you look at the evolution of the viruses in bats, you can see that the mutations that occurred gradually over time in the wild, not necessarily in a lab, really were getting closer and closer and closer to being able to adapt itself with probably an intermediate host. We don't know what that host is yet. There have been some surmises about what it is. So that if you track its normal evolution, there's more than every reason to believe that this just was a natural occurrence, much, 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 much more likely of jumping from an animal in the wild, particularly with the exposure.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm trying to figure out, okay, let's assume all that is true. Why did Italy become such a hot spot? Why is the whole nation, the whole country on lockdown right now? What happened there?
Yeah. What happened is that they did not, as we did, restrict travel from China. And the Chinese travel all over the world. There's 1.4 billion of them, and they travel all over to the United States and to Italy and to the European Union. And one of the issues which is unfortunate for the European Union, particularly for Italy, because they're suffering the most, is that there were no constraints on travel. You might recall that we in the United States, under President Trump's order, essentially shut down travel, or making it very, very difficult. Certainly not from people who are Americans who want to come back. They still have to go under a 14-day self-imposed quarantine. But we did that early, and so therefore the influx from China was markedly diminished. The Italians, unfortunately, did not. So the origin of theirs originally was from China. And now what's happened, unfortunately, is that the bulk of the transmission to other countries, including our own, is coming actually from Europe.
We've posted my entire interview with Dr. Fauci on our Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/America Bolling, all one word. The Pentagon announced this week it will give 5 million respirators and 2,000 ventilators to the Department of Health and Human Services. Sinclair National correspondent James Rosen takes an in-depth look at what else the military might be able to do.
At his coronavirus news conference on Tuesday, President Trump disclosed internal deliberations over the possible use of the military to help contain the outbreak.
We're dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers should that be necessary. We have them working in some cases, on standby in other cases.
In 1967, President Johnson ordered troops from the 101st Airborne Division to Detroit to quell rioting. During Hurricane Katrina, the military airlifted evacuees and performed other disaster relief missions. That same year, Vice President Cheney and his wife toured a mobile hospital in Pakistan, set up by the 212th MASH unit following a massive earthquake.
When I was part of the response to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, the U.S. military set up what was the equivalent of a combat hospital in an area that had major damage to its healthcare facility.
But Pentagon officials caution their mobile hospitals are small in scale, designed to treat trauma patients and combat casualties.
What we're trying to be very careful of is not overpromising. Our fixed facilities are designed to the force that we have. They're not 1,000-bed medical centers all over the United States. They're, for the most part, small community hospitals.
To support overburdened coastal cities, the military could deploy its 2 hospital ships, U.S. Naval Ship Comfort at Norfolk and U.S. Naval Ship Mercy in San Diego, each equipped with 1,000 beds and 12 operating rooms. But the nation's wartime medical capability resides chiefly in the Army Reserves and National Guard, and experts warn of the costs of reassigning those personnel.
A lot of those people are civilian doctors, so if you put them in the National Guard, you take them away from, the hospitals that you have.
After the 9/11 attacks, soldiers deployed to airports and train stations and could theoretically be used to enforce lockdowns and curfews today. But federal law prohibits federal troops from conducting law enforcement on U.S. soil, and memories of National Guard units killing student protesters at Kent State University in 1970 make state officials reluctant to avail themselves of that option. In short, there's plenty the military can do to support state and local authorities, but their contribution would at best be just that, a support role, and the top brass are already seeking to downplay expectations, warning that the armed forces, acting in what is essentially a non-military environment, cannot and will not be the solution to the coronavirus. At the Pentagon, James Rosen.
Mr. President, as America tries to come to grips with the coronavirus, the economy has been decimated. Just the stock market alone is in the midst of a whopping 32% drop in a few days, which has wiped out more than $10 trillion from our 401ks and our retirement funds. On top of that, consumer confidence is crashing. As a nation, we are cocooning. The U.S. economy is extremely reliant on our consumers. 70% of our GDP relies on consumer spending. That's why the current plans being floated just won't work. They allow for tax breaks, interest relief, etc. None address the consumer now. So here's a plan that will deliver a much-needed shot of adrenaline into our economy and give our consumers some badly needed relief. I propose this. Each U.S. household at or below $200,000 per year gets the following: $1,000 for food, $1,000 for health-related goods and services, and $300 for fuel, electricity, and transportation. Now, here's the most important catch. This money must be spent within 30 days. If you don't spend it, it expires, because there's a second round coming in 30 days if you, Mr. President, deem it necessary. We administer the money via debit cards, much like the current EBT card. The many products which can be purchased can be decided by your bean counters. That's not what we're worried about. We want it to be easy to spend the money, and to use it or lose it is a powerful way to do that. Under the plan, 91% of American households will qualify for the card, and total costs will be $230 billion each round you approve. What this accomplishes is twofold. Number one, the economy gets a massive injection of life-saving adrenaline, cash spent immediately. And number two, our households get what they need, products they can use. The plan is easy to administer and to keep in check. Households will be relieved to know they're going to be okay. And small business will be the direct beneficiary of that money. Restaurants, bars, Walgreens, CVS, gas stations. Most importantly, 100% of the money is used for the good of the people, our small businesses in the economy. 0% goes to the bankers, the shareholders, nor the landlord class. I hope you take this framework and decide to move forward with this plan, Mr. President. Time is important. The economy and the American people need this now, not if the bureaucrats waste time microanalyzing it. You're a man who understands this is an urgently needed solution to a problem no one saw coming. Thank you for taking the time to allow me to present you with an idea out of the box, but one that will work. Ahead on America This Week, former Deputy National Security Advisor KT McFarland discusses the relationship between China and the U.S. following the coronavirus outbreak. And by the way, that plan you just heard was presented to the president. Went directly to the White House, got in front of him. You'll hear an update on it as soon as I do. I've already heard back from the White House saying the plan is on its way to the economic advisors immediately, and I will keep you on board.
America, one nation, from Florida to St. Louis to Seattle. America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, delivers rough and tumble political arguments.
On the left, this new embrace of socialism.
The whole thing is ridiculous.
Hard-edged opinions.
The media let Joe Biden get away with his first big lie.
They can come after me all they want, but they're going to have to kill me if they want me to stop defending the president.
Tough topic debates.
Destabilization in the Middle East, more chaos and more terrorism.
Unless we get away from all of this hatred, we're going to destroy ourselves.
We have to solve the border problems.
The wall is a big chunk of what we're talking about.
America This Week reveals the topics and issues that pulse throughout America. Investigates stories revealing toxic forever chemicals in water supplies.
My family was poisoned. My child was poisoned. I have been poisoned.
There he is, over here, straight ahead. Chaos at the southern border.
Go, 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 go.
Cartels, rape, gangs, and violence.
So you guys are both hitmen?
America This Week investigates the facts and the falsehoods and relentlessly seeks the truth on your behalf.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week. Let's get right to the interview segment. She's the former Deputy National Security Advisor for the Trump administration, KT McFarland. Also, for the record, a good friend of mine for many, many years. KT, welcome back. I love doing TV with you. It's going about 20 years or so. KT, I'm watching this virus. I watch how China handled the early stages of it. They kept quiet. They didn't tell anyone. They in some times imprisoned doctors who knew more. What do we do as an administration to tell China that is not cool? We're not going to put up with this again on COVID-20 or COVID-21.
You know, I think you've made a really important point, which is that the Chinese, they precipitated and then they accelerated this problem. Why? Because they knew they had a problem back in the fall, in December. Certainly by December they knew. They covered it up. They arrested and silenced their whistleblowers so that valuable time was lost where the world could have come in, studied the virus, worked on vaccines. We could have worked on containment so that it had been contained within China. But the Chinese government made the decision to cover it up and to let Chinese people go all over the world and American tourists and others come into China. So the containment was no longer an option by January. It had already spread past China. And now the Chinese, who have really, because of their own policies with their own population, they're kind of over the worst of it right now, but it's hitting us and particularly hitting Europe in full force. So what are the Chinese doing? They're cooperating and sharing data, but for the most part, they're now on a PR offensive. They decided they don't want to be blamed for this, that if anybody, including the President of the United States, calls this the Chinese coronavirus, they're screaming that it's racist, it really is an American problem. So they're already playing politics. They played politics with it at the beginning, and now they're playing politics with it again. And I think that when this is all over, we need to reassess our whole relationship with the Chinese.
In reassess that relationship, we've had a trade war with China, but President Trump is very, very close to President Xi. So it's a tightrope. I get it. You know, they've expelled a couple, U.S. journalists. I think the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the New York Times have been thrown out of China because they're reporting what they're seeing. What's the recourse?
Well, they want to silence truth. Now, what's our recourse right this minute? Right now, we just have to get through this crisis. We've got to get to the point where the United States recovers, our economy recovers, our society recovers. But when it's over, then go to the Chinese and say, no more. You can never do this again. And you're never going to be able to suppress free speech. And you're not going to be able to do all the things you did before Trump was president, which is really stealing intellectual property, gaming the system, not playing fair trade, but absolutely using every aspect to beg, borrow, steal, or buy American technology. That's what their goal is when this is all done, is that they want to have an economy that recovers more quickly than ours, and it puts them into a position where they can kind of pick up the pieces of our shattered economy.
Katie, I only have about half a minute or so, and please be concise, and I know this is very difficult to do. Just recently, North Korea has been saber-rattling us a little bit. We're at the depths of this virus. We're trying to combat it, and they say, oh, we're going to have a surprise for you coming soon. Where's the security policy play here?
I think you just ignore them. Let the North Koreans know by private channels, you screw this up and you take advantage of us during this period, they'll be hell to pay when it's over. But right now, the North Koreans just want to get back in the game. They want to get back in the story. We've ignored them for 6 months, and they want to make the world know that they're important again.
All right. KT, we need you back in that seat. I want you back there. Everyone, KT McFarland, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Liz Bonis is one of the best medical reporters out there. She's with our Sinclair station, WKRC in Cincinnati, Ohio, and joins us now. Liz, thanks for being here. So give us one of the biggest misconceptions you think is out there regarding the coronavirus.
So I think when I look at my misconceptions, it's that all of us should disregard common sense. And what I mean by this is yesterday I was out covering a blood story. In other words, our blood supply has taken a drastic hit. And while we were out in this mobile unit, somebody came in, and not only were they mad that we were covering the story, they were mad that we're asking people to come out and donate blood. And God bless the specialist there who handles the blood bank. He said, you know what? Everything in life is benefit versus risk. And if people don't have blood, they die. Your grandmother does not have the treatment she needs in cancer. That child will not be able to have surgery. Heaven forbid you get in a car accident. Sir, I have to weigh that every day. And for us to say that people should not leave their houses to help others survive for something that most people will feel as a common cold is simply not the way to approach this. So I have to tell you, it's just been, please use common sense. If you can save a life, it might be the thing to do.
Right. And by no means am I patting a back to we journal or patting the backs of us journalists, because frankly we really don't deserve that. However, I do think we provide a service in times like this, where, well, like you're pointing out, the need for blood. A lot of people have been talking about our blood banks are dwindling because no one wants to go out. Number one, number two, they're worried about being close to some infection, so they stay away. I remember back in the AIDS epidemic, the blood supply dwindled as well. So as a journalist, you get out there to get the information. I have people saying, why are you on a flight? Are you absolutely essential? No, we're not essential. We're not medical and we're not government, but we are trying to portray and trying to give out information.
Well, I also think what you said, that giving out the right information is key. I mean, I heard you say, we've reached peak stupid, and you may be right. But the other thing that I really want to say in this is why we remind people it is important to stay well. It's important to be healthy. I don't drag my butt up every day to run a 10K because I want to wear size 6 jeans. They're a little tight sometimes, I know. But I want to do that every day because I want my body to fight back. We are all exposed to unknown bugs all the time. And anytime you are not well and not taking care of yourself, you're at greater risk. So I think in some ways, I feel like we're ignoring some of the things that we should have been talking about long before this, that all of us need to stay as well as possible. If we get a wake-up call for this, I will say that maybe something good could come from something terrible.
Well, Liz, we're going to leave it right there, and appreciate your time. Liz Bonis, WKRC in Cincinnati. Appreciate your time, and we'll stay on top of the way the people are treating the media. Maybe there's a story in that one as well. Liz Bonis, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Hey.
All right, next, Doctors Colby Grossman and Dina Grayson talk about what hospitals are experiencing right now and what to expect. Don't go anywhere. Now I'd like to introduce our panel of expert physicians to discuss the virus. Dr. Dina Grayson is an expert on pandemic threats, and Dr. Colby Grossman, president and founder of the Palmetto Clinical Research Group. Okay, let me start with you, Dr. Grayson. A week ago we sat here and we talked about pandemic. Now I flew into D.C. on a plane with 3 people on it and checked into a hotel. I likely am the only guest at this hotel. The world seems to have shifted in the last 5 or 6 days since we last spoke. Are we deeper into a pandemic than we were just a week ago?
Well, Eric, yes, unfortunately we are. And, as I've been warning people for over a month, we should expect to see the number of cases in this country explode starting in the latter half of March, throughout March and into April, unfortunately. And I do think that now Americans are obviously coming to grips with this and, seeing the number of cases, I think in particular in Italy, has really been very eye-opening for Americans, as well as, of course, we're now having sort of partial lockdowns and even total lockdowns in various cities and states across the country.
Colby, a week ago we did a special, it was actually less than a week ago, and you had held up a test and also a mask, and you said, I'm getting the test, but I can't get my hands on these masks. Has anything changed in that week? Are these essential tools any more accessible to you in your practice?
Well, no, actually, nothing's really any better. The only thing that's better, Eric, is that there are 2 institutions in Charleston, Medical University of South Carolina and also Roper, and they are actually doing testing for us now. So you can go on their virtual website. Roper's done a tremendous job, and MSC, I think, was the first. But that's helped us a lot because still, without the proper equipment, I really can't test.
Are you seeing patients, Dr. Grossman?
So I am seeing patients. That's the reason I'm in my lab coat today and I'm in my office because I had to Skype this one because I've been so busy. Everybody's really concerned. And so we're seeing patients. Obviously, if people come in and they've traveled to one of the endemic countries, obviously we send them elsewhere because really don't want those in the office. We don't have the capability since we can't protect ourselves. But we're seeing a lot of patients. We're telling our patients come in. We have private rooms that we're actually putting people in so they don't have to sit in the waiting room. So we're seeing our regular patients. We're seeing sick patients. I saw 2 cases with the flu yesterday. And I've sent 4 people for COVID testing.
Okay. I want to get back to some of the results of that. But Dr. Grayson, I got an email from a building management company that said, by the way, someone on the upper floors of a 50-story building has tested positive for coronavirus. Now, it felt almost like we were isolating this person. Are people that dangerous to be around who've been exposed to COVID-19? Should we treat them almost the way lepers were treated decades ago?
Well, we want to make sure that people that have tested positive for the coronavirus are isolated and quarantined. If you live in the same building, you should have separate ventilation from that person's apartment where they're quarantined. Obviously, then you would want to make sure that the building is washing down buttons.
It's important I stop you there because everything we've heard, and I'm just trying to separate fact from fiction. Everything I've heard is it's droplet based. Now, how in the world would a droplet on a floor of 10 or 15 floors away from me get into the ventilation system and still survive to infect me?
And that's my point, Eric. It shouldn't. So I'm glad you clarified that. And I think the one thing you'd also want to make sure that your building is doing is making sure that they do a very thorough cleaning of surfaces, in particular elevator buttons, because we know that this virus is viable for up to 3 days on plastic. So one of the other thing I would say is, you mentioned, should we treat these people like lepers? No, what we should do is treat them once they recover as saviors, because we can potentially collect their serum, and it has antibodies in it that could potentially be used right now in the absence of a vaccine or effective treatment, that we could purify these antibodies and use them as a potential treatment for very sick patients.
All right.
So I think as long as they're quarantined, that we should be protected.
Colby, I got about 30 seconds here. So we're seeing a lot of these shelter in place, these bars and restaurants are closed, don't gather with more than 10 people. Yet I see people partying on Miami Beach on spring break. I mean, do we need to get into martial law? Do we need to show a force by the federal government to come in and say, hey, you partiers on Miami Beach, you're really risking the rest of our lives?
So people need to be responsible. Actually, I have limited myself and my wife from going to anything social. We won't go to anybody's house for the next 14 days. I think everybody has to do their part. I don't think martial law is where it's at. I think right now it's a matter of being responsible. We don't have enough people to do that, Eric. But I do think that testing is hugely important. I just want to say that the death rate in Washington State was 5%, the death rate in California, 1.7%, and the death rate in New York right now, 13 patients have died, 1,700 patients have been tested. I think the most important thing to do, if we're going to achieve death rates of less than 1%, is we have to test people so we can get those people who are infectious off the street.
All right. In other words, we'll get the denominator number a lot bigger. That'll bring the rate down. We're going to leave it right there. Dr. Grayson, thank you very much. Dr. Grossman, thank you very much. We have, again, get you guys back in the seat because you're helping us explain some pretty crazy times in America right now. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having me.
And next on America This Week, as restaurants and businesses close, many people are unexpectedly unemployed. What you need to know to get help. Thousands of people are now out of work because of social distancing requirements stemming from the coronavirus outbreak. Suzanne Fahn with Sinclair Station KOMO in Seattle takes a closer look at the challenges unemployed workers and small businesses are facing to get help.
Jack's Barbecue in South Lake Union, Seattle is still offering to-go orders, just 24 hours after owner Jack Timmons had to lay off 60 employees.
They're kind of in shock, like everybody's in shock.
It was a tough decision, and now many of those unemployed workers are in need of help.
I told them that they should get to the unemployment benefits website and fill that out as soon as possible.
The biggest concern for many workers now, how to pay for rent and how to pay for food. 58-year-old bartender and waitress Sherry Burke is living paycheck to paycheck.
I'm sorry to say I didn't really have a plan.
Burke told me she already applied for 3 jobs, but she doesn't know where to begin to apply for unemployment.
What got me so concerned about this is just that there's no playbook for this for people like me.
Authorities say it's important to file a claim for unemployment benefits. Your Employment Security Department website will have the links to your state resources, along with information on how to apply for unemployment. Small business owner Lori Tice owns Upward Dog Walker in Seattle. After her business dropped 80%,
I have had to lay off 3 of those employees out of the 4 that I just hired in February.
now she's trying to secure help for herself from the Small Business Association.
I did try to get onto that SBA site this morning, and it's overwhelmed right now.
She tried 10 to 15 times and kept getting an error message. Tice was told it'll lighten up as people get their application completed.
So I was advised to just keep trying every opportunity that I get.
If you're going to apply for help using your phone, just know that you're going to have to wait longer, and it's going to take longer than applying online. So if you can, use a computer. For America This Week, I'm Suzanne Fawn in Seattle.
Thank you, Suzanne and Como. We've all heard the phrase social distancing by now, but does it really look like this? And what we've heard, Maxine Stryker with Sinclair station WBFF in Baltimore explains.
Social distancing essentially means staying away from large crowds or keeping your distance from people whenever possible. According to the CDC, that distance is 6 feet, or from right about where you are to me, right here. But how realistic do people think it is to stay 6 feet from one another while going about their everyday lives? And does it really work?
5 feet. One more. Oh, 6 feet.
6 feet, or 72 inches.
This is really far.
It is. 6 feet. Here, you take that in.
That's how far apart the CDC recommends you stay away from others to properly practice social distancing.
With your friends, I feel like it's kind of ridiculous.
It's one way to limit the spread of the coronavirus.
I wouldn't find myself doing this. It's like we're strangers right now.
But
what about restaurants? You can't even sit next to each other.
it may be easier said than done.
I mean, it's almost impossible. If you catch the bus or you're in a grocery store or in a barber shop or wherever you at, you typically closer than 6 feet.
I know it's so hard to do that because we really want to be close to people.
Even Dr. Miriam Alexander recognizes social distancing isn't always realistic.
Obviously, you need to go grocery shopping, but you can try to go at low volume times if you possibly can.
But she says it works when it comes to minimizing the spread of germs.
Viruses are transmitted usually in the particles, the droplets that we breathe out or that come out in our cough or our sneeze. And if someone is not close to you, they're much less likely to be exposed.
There's no need to carry a tape measure around, but for now, just do your best to keep your distance. In Baltimore, Maxine Stryker, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Maxine. Every week we honor first responders who died in the line of duty protecting our great country. Officer Christopher Walsh with the Springfield, Missouri Police Department was shot and killed on Monday in the line of duty. Officer Walsh joined the police department in 2016. He was also a U.S. Army veteran and active in the U.S. Army Reserves for 10 years. He is survived by his wife and daughter. And Corporal Andrew Gillette of the Sumter County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina was shot and killed in the line of duty in February. Corporal Gillette was a U.S. Air Force veteran and served the Sumter County Sheriff's Office for 7 years. He leaves behind his wife and 11-year-old son. Rest in peace, officers.
America, one nation, from Florida to St. Louis to Seattle. America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, delivers rough and tumble political arguments.
On the left, this new embrace of socialism. The whole thing is ridiculous.
Hard-edged opinions.
The media let Joe Biden get away with his first big lie.
They can come after me all they want, but they're going to have to kill me if they want me to stop defending the president.
Tough topic debates.
Destabilization in the Middle East, more chaos and more terrorism.
Unless we get away from all of this hatred, we're going to destroy ourselves.
We have to solve the border problems.
The wall is a big chunk of what we're talking about.
America This Week reveals the topics and issues that pulse throughout America. Investigates stories revealing toxic forever chemicals in water supplies.
My family was poisoned. My child was poisoned. I have been poisoned.
There he is, over here, straight ahead.
Chaos at the southern border.
Go, 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 go.
Cartels, rape, gangs, and violence.
So you guys are both hitmen?
America This Week investigates the facts and the falsehoods and relentlessly seeks the truth on your behalf.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week.
want to speak particularly to our largest generation now, our millennials. They are the core group that will stop this virus.
That was Dr. Deborah Birx with the President's Coronavirus Task Force. Her statement inspired us to see what millennials have to say about the virus, the changes they've made in their own lives, and the impact it's having. Veronica Urowski is one of the producers for America This Week right here in D.C. Dominique Johnson is a producer at Sinclair Station WBFF in Baltimore. Mason Waldvogel is the assistant news director at our station in Tulsa, Oklahoma, KTUL, and Jen Pellegrino is the White House correspondent for One America News Network. Veronica, we'll start with you. Things that you got on your plate coming up. You have a wedding coming up. How is the virus affecting you personally and your plans?
Hey, Eric. So with my wedding planning, I was in the beginning feeling very lucky. My wedding's not until September, so everything seemed really far away. With the president's most recent statements about the effects in the U.S. being felt probably until July and into August, that has been making me a little nervous. Some pre-wedding planning events, bridal shower, bachelorette parties, going to visit vendors, all of that stuff has kind of been on a halt. But a lot of my vendors have been really great and really communicating with me, so it's really making me feel more comfortable. But right now it's a waiting game.
Jen, I think a lot of the stress, and we see some of the pictures we see in Miami Beach. We see kids partying and young people partying on the beach, almost like this thing isn't that real. Meanwhile, you walk around this city and you're doing the same thing. It's a ghost town. It's scary. It's almost post-apocalyptic. What do you have to say to the fellow millennials, friends of yours, who may or may not be partying on Miami Beach?
That's right. I say stay home. I'm somebody who have parents that are in their 70s and they're susceptible to this. Our older generation, those with pre-existing conditions, it's on my generation to make sure that we're staying home because we don't know if we're transmitting it. So, if you see people out there, I say go home. It's a couple of weeks to save lives.
And what do you say, Mason? What about you? What do you're in Tulsa, you're in Oklahoma, you're a little bit away from the bigger cities. Does it feel any different, do you think, to you than it does to some of us who are in D.C. and other?
I don't think so. Oklahoma now has 29 cases, and half of those are which are in that millennial age range. And so I think that we're starting to see that kind of trickle to come into the middle part of the United States. And for us, too, even this weekend, people still aren't getting to those warnings that the White House, Dr. Burke, are giving us. We're still out doing things, and we're still out. St. Patrick's Day was this weekend. Breweries were packed, bars were packed.
That's dangerous.
Just until yesterday.
Honestly, I'm scared of that, Mason. I'm afraid. I walked into the Trump Hotel this week, and it was a ghost town. There wasn't anyone. You tell me that a bar was busy in Oklahoma. To me, that sounds scary.
No, that's absolutely. Tulsa has a lot of breweries, and that is something that we've seen. Are more people still going out and celebrating? Just until I think it started to hit this weekend, really Mondays when we started to see that transition, and especially as the mayor of Tulsa decided, hey, you know what, we're closing all the bars, all the restaurants, all the gyms. But until that, it was just everyday life. Yeah. In fact, we had a producer here at the station who just came back from Phoenix this weekend. People are still wanting to plan. And another employee of ours was wanting to go to Disney World. Right. It's like Disney World's closed.
Yeah, I think one of the other concerning thing was that picture the last night at Disney World before it shut down. It was a mob scene. Dominique, in Baltimore, they say there are certain events that make stuff get real. Has that hit Baltimore? Was there something that sticks out in your mind that this thing really got real for you?
Governor Hogan has been really ahead of the curve, I think, when it comes to closing things. So Baltimore shut down pretty early. They shut everything down on Monday, I believe, ahead of St. Patrick's Day. And the reason for that is because this weekend there were a lot of pictures circulating of a lot of people at the bars at Fed Hill and a lot of people out in Fells Point. I think it's hit. I think it's really hit. Our grocery stores are empty. There's no chicken at the Giant down the street. I think that reality has set in for us, for sure.
How about you, Veronica? When S gets real, what was it for you?
So this past week has been really crazy. We've, like Dominique had said, we went to the grocery store that's around the corner from my apartment in DC, and it was empty. If I needed toilet paper, I can't get it. If I can't find hand sanitizer anywhere. Chicken also is a huge thing that I can't find in the grocery store. And, I live in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with my fiance and my dog. It's a tight space, and we're just kind of like, how are we going to do this for the next however many days? We're all on top of each other.
Jen, last answer. I only got about 20 seconds or so. You work at the White House a couple days a week. How has life changed for you since it hit?
It's a lot different. Our temperatures are taken before we even enter the White House now. It started over the weekend where we were somewhat ambushed as the doctor came up to us and said, hey, we have to take your temperature. So it's a little bit different. There's social distancing going on. We're seated a couple of seats away from one another. So things are changing.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Veronica, Jen, Mason, Dominique, thank you very much. Our millennial panel, folks, we'll bring you back to check in on you later in the virus, so to speak. And we want to hear the coronavirus outbreak, how it's impacting you. Do you work in the restaurant or hotel industry? Have you lost your job? Tell us how this outbreak has changed your day-to-day life. Go to facebook.com/America Bowling, all one word, and leave a video, a comment, anything you'd like. You can also private message us there. We want to hear it, and we want to get it up on TV for everyone to see. And before we go, here's something that caught the attention of America this week. While the humans are away, the penguins will play. Chicago's Shed Aquarium closed because of the coronavirus, but that doesn't mean the fun ended. The aquarium tweeted this video, which went viral over the weekend. And you know what? Just, rather than me explain this, just behold dinosaur awesomeness. This was something to behold. Awesome, awesome times in this. This is real social distancing, folks. All right, gotta love it. You gotta love dinosaurs. That's it from us from the DC Swamp. Stay safe, stay healthy. That's a wrap. Bye. Remember, plan. Don't panic.